So hello, welcome to the Expat Pod. My name's James, your host, and today I'm joined by Andrew. And Andrew, we go back a long time. I think probably early 5, 6, 7, maybe from drama. It's a lovely
Sounds
time.
about right.
Yeah, but most of our lives. But I haven't spoken to you about 12 years, which is quite interesting. And I just saw that you live in China on Facebook, and you just had a child, which is congratulations. But do you want to share a bit about you and where you've lived?
Yeah. So as James says, I'm Andrew. I'm from Vaughanby. I currently live in Guangzhou in China, and I've lived here for about 6 months. Before that, I was living in Shenzhen, which is just a bit further south, again in Guangdong, China. I've also lived in Changsha, which is a bit further north, and in Qatar.
So we're on section 1 of the podcast about getting there. So Andrew, you said you lived based in China. First of all, how did you get there? What was your inspiration for wanting to leave and go traveling, to live in China?
Well, it started when I was at university, and I was training to be an actor. And towards the end, I just stopped enjoying it. It was not really what I wanted to do anymore. So I started looking around for various different options of things to do, and went down the teaching route. Got a PGC, but I didn't think I was ready to go into all of that. So I started looking around for ways to get more experience, and from 2 places on the exact same day, I heard about a company called Teach English in China, which I signed up with, and that's how I ended up in China for the first time.
And how long was the first time you went for?
I was there for exactly a year, and that's when I went out to Changsha, which is the capital of Hunan province, which is regarded as a midland area, but still quite far south in China.
Okay. And what was the process for that? Did you applied for this teacher or teaching course or teaching role?
It was a company. So I paid a fee to sign up, did a few courses. In fact, one of the very last courses I did at university was preparation for life outside of uni. So I combined them both, and I did my China preparations on this for this company, which was Mars. I was being marked for preparations I needed to do, and I only got a B. So I don't know what A or A star preparation is, but whatever. But yeah, I went to have quite a few injections at the time, a few trips of paperwork. Took a while, but there wasn't any problems. It was pretty much straight through. And then I flew out to Beijing in August 2014, and that's when I did some preparation. I did a 2-week training course in a state school in Shunyi district, which is the very northeast section of Beijing. And then after 2 weeks there, I went down to Changsha.
Nice. And in terms of your preparation before you left, then was it a lot of paperwork? Did you have to go to London a lot to the embassies, or was there other places you could go or posted?
I was quite lucky first time around. There wasn't really not many journeys. It was just more a question of filling in the forms, getting the invitation letter, which is something that's unique to China. You have to be invited to come and work out here. But that was all fairly straightforward, and it was just a question of crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and I was out here, thank goodness.
And was it an expensive way of doing it using this company, or was it not too eye-watering? So I know some visa applications can be quite expensive.
It became expensive. It wasn't so much the company itself that was expensive, it was all the excess things that went on around it. So all the getting your plane tickets, getting the visa fees, getting the injections, and it added up, which was fine, but when you're a student coming out of university, it was pretty hard hitting.
And before you went, did you try and learn some Pinyin, or did you try and do any language?
I tried, and I stress the word tried, and the fact that I am still trying suggests how well that first attempt went. It was languages were unfortunately just not my forte. But having said that, doing a little bit every day on Duolingo, and it's slowly but surely seeping in. But at the time, I was hopeless, utterly hopeless.
I mean, that's how I felt in Sweden, to be fair. So, albeit the alphabet's the same, so it's easy to read.
Yeah, I was not that lucky. I was not that lucky. And I remember when I was in Changsha the first time round, I spent a lot of time going into restaurants where there were only pictures. So I wouldn't go to the restaurants where it was just a written menu because I didn't stand a chance. But if I went to a restaurant where there was pictures on the menu, I could go, I want that one. I want that one. And that's how I survived for the first 6 months.
Oh, wow. We'll get into that a bit more in the next section. Obviously, after the first year, you then went back. How long were you home for?
I was back for about a year because I deferred my PGCE place. So that first time round was always going to be 1 year. But when I was there, in Changsha the first time round, that's when I met my now wife. So so there was that. And then when I was leaving, I felt that my time in China wasn't finished. It wasn't just, well, Susan is what the main reason I came back. I always felt like there was more I could do here. There was more I wanted to achieve. So as soon as I did my PGCE, I actually applied for the same course again, but I managed to skip a few of the steps because I'd already been out there, I'd already done the course. So I just flew out the second time round, and yeah, that's how I ended up in Changsha for the second time.
And was that another full year, or was that longer?
It turned into a full year. That time was a bit more open, but between me and Susan, we decided that we wanted to go to the UK for a while. That's actually where we got married in the end. So we did a few things here in China, but the actual wedding was in the UK.
Oh, nice. And where were you living in the UK? Was it back in the Northwest, or was it somewhere else?
Liverpool initially, and then we moved down to Runcorn for a while because I had a job down there, and I was there for about 2 years, I think, and then COVID hit, and COVID changed everything.
I think you did for most people, to be fair, but in your circumstance, then that didn't want you to go back home, or?
Susan went back initially because she was worried about her family, and so she went back, and we talked at the time about the idea of me going as well, just dropping everything, but I couldn't do that for work reasons. I just couldn't drop everything. So Susan went back, I stayed in work, and then all the borders shut, and so it became pretty clear that if I stayed in the UK, it would be very difficult for both Susan and myself. So that's when Qatar came around. So the idea would have been that I went out to work there, and Susan would meet me in Qatar. And so then I went there, but then there were a lot of issues with HR and visas and quarantine hotels and all sorts. So that's when I started looking for options back in China again. And so I got lucky. That's when I moved to Shenzhen. And then that process was probably the most difficult one and the most nerve-wracking. But once I got into Shenzhen, I spent 2 lovely years there. And then that's when I moved to Guangzhou, where I am now.
So how long were you in Qatar for?
I was in Qatar for about a year.
Okay, so still quite a long time to be a part. And
well, definitely, I worked a full academic year. It was still and full experience, and that was an experience in itself, albeit a very different one. China's always the place I felt most at home.
And was going to Qatar, how did you find that process? Was it a similar thing of applying for a visa and getting it, or?
It was lengthy. It was a bit easier because of visa requirements for going to Qatar are a lot easier to get hold of, being British, but it was a bit more, you must do this, you must get this documented, tested, you must get this stamped and then counter-stamped and stamped again by our embassy and their embassy, and so that was quite expensive. That was a very expensive process.
Did you teach in a similar kind of school, or how did you find that role in Qatar compared to the roles you found in China?
In Qatar, I was teaching in an international school, but in reality, international means 96% Qatari, and then the other 4% are Egyptian, Syrian, Algerian, etc., all countries from the Arab world. So even though it was down as an international school, it wasn't really that international, and it was quite Islamist, like conservative Islamist, which was fine. It was a great experience to be a part of, but it just I never really, as a teacher, I never really enjoyed being there. So when I moved to Shenzhen, that's when I went into an international school. So Changsha was very much the state schools, which were very unique. When I went to Shenzhen, it was more of follow the British curriculum, and it's very much being in a British school, but in China.
Okay, and is there anything else you wanted to kind of touch upon before having to leave or having to move?
Well, not especially. I mean, when I was first in Changsha, I did a lot of backpacking, and one of the best things I ever did was during Chinese New Year. Before I met Susan, if I'd stayed in China, I would have been by myself. And Chinese New Year is a wonderful holiday, really fantastic, but it's all about family. So if you don't have family here, then it can be quite lonely or isolating. So I took the opportunity to go traveling around Southeast Asia. Yes, I've been to China and stuff by myself. I never actually been on the holiday by myself, and as in booked one night in a hotel, no plans, just going completely free flow. And I spent that time, about 5 weeks, traveling Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand. And that was one of the best things personally for me I'd ever done.
Oh wow, that's great to hear. And because travel is such a great healing, I think, for a lot of people in terms of headspace. I've done quite a lot of traveling. I always want to do more traveling, which shows how good traveling is. And I think a lot of people have the same affinity with it. Just it gets quite expensive.
Yeah, it is. It's very true that traveling is a bug. Once you catch it, you can't shake it off, no matter what you try to do. Even now, when you are hunkered down, being a father and tied into contracts and things, you just think, I want to go there. I really want to go there. I want to go there. I want to go there. Yeah, it never goes.
Well, wonderful. I think we can go into section 2. Hey, so welcome to section 2 of the podcast, all about being there. So, Andrew, this is where I kind of capture your initial impressions of all the places you've lived. Also, any anecdotes, the cultural variation, food, social life, all the fun stuff, really. So, we'll start off with your initial impression when you packed your bags and flew to China. How did you react when you first arrived? What was it like getting on a plane and going to wherever you were staying?
The journey was long. Like, it was, I did it in 2 longish flights. I think it was 8 hours to Dubai and then 8 hours again onto Beijing. And because I was going out with a company, I arranged to meet up with some other people in Dubai. So we all came from different parts of the UK. We all flew in, we met up in Dubai, and then we did the last plane ride together, which was great. But we were there for about 8 hours in the middle of the night, and we ended up sleeping on the floor in a telephone box because there was just no space. Everyone was just moving about, and we were all exhausted. And yeah, so that was lengthy. When we arrived in China, we were greeted by some young people who were clearly volunteers to come and show us around Beijing, as it were, and that was really nice. When got taken to the hotel, we had about a day or two before we actually started the course. So there was about 5 or 6 of us. We all decided to go down to the Forbidden City, which we did on the subway. And it took us about an hour and a half to get there, which just again on the subway tells you how big Beijing was. It is massive, absolutely massive. We all got there, and one of my new colleagues, she was really pale skin, long blonde hair. And as we were walking around the Forbidden City, lots of people started pointing at her and taking pictures of her. And through our guide, she said that they all thought she was Taylor Swift. Instead of going, no, it's not this, you're being silly, we all decided to play along with it. So there were about 4 or 5 of us lads, and we all kind of stood around her with headphones to our ears, and we were all pretending to be her bodyguards. And when people were trying to get up close, we were like, "No, go away, Taylor, she's busy." And that was a quite an amusing time doing that. In terms of the actual people, the people are lovely. Seriously lovely people. Now sometimes they'll stare at you because initially when I first went out there, they did a lot of staring because most of the time they hadn't seen that many white faces before. But as soon as you try and say hello or you wave at them, they wave back, big smiles, and they'll bend over backwards for you sometimes. Like even with my wife's with my family now, I was terrified when I went to meet them, but they've taken me in as their own, and it is absolutely amazing. The kindness they've shown to me over the years is just magnificent.
Well, that's wonderful to hear, and interesting story about Taylor Swift. Going back to that, then, are you still friends with the people you first met there?
I'm in contact with them, but as the program worked, they would send you off to different places all around China. Some people went to Shanghai, some stayed in Beijing, some went with me to Changsha, some down to Shenzhen. We went all over the place, so we try to stay in touch as best we can, and we all have WeChat, which is the staple of living in China. If you go to China, you must get WeChat. Everything runs through WeChat. But over time, I suppose it's just how the nature of society, people come, people go. Like you lose touch with them, but that doesn't mean you stop being friends with them. Look, I mean, take us, for example. We've not talked in God only knows how long, but we still class each other as friends, and it's the same here.
Oh, completely, yeah. And that's the wonderful thing about social media now as well. You can literally just go and send someone a message you haven't spoken to for how long. And life as an adult means you are splitting your life between work and then trying to survive so you can go to work. There's not a lot of time for everything else. When you're a kid, all you can do is just, be with your friends and avoid school. Yeah, going back to it in terms of your initial impressions then. So when you finished your 2-week course, you then were moved from Beijing to the location where you were working. What was that like? What was your accommodation like? Did they help you out with all that as well?
So when I first went, the hotel we stayed in for the first 2 weeks was fine, but then we were sent off by overnight sleeper. But when we were taken to the station, the company dropped us off at the wrong station. So they dropped us off at the main high speed one, which is where the bullet trains go from Beijing West. But our tickets were on the sleeper service from Beijing Central. So we ended up having to take this mad dash across the city on these tiny little bike scooters with all our suitcases tucked up on us. And so here with me with a big rucksack on my back, a suitcase in front of me, and 2 small handbags, trying to hold on the back of a motorbike, going in and out of the Beijing traffic. Most terrifying and surreal experience I've ever had in China, certainly up there. And then we got on the sleeper train, and we were on that for about 18 hours, I think. It was quite a slow process. And one of the many things you can have out here is a drink called baijiu, which is incredibly strong. And when I left my course in Beijing, one of my pupils gave me a bottle of it, and it was about 88 to 90% alcohol, and it was in the shape of a nuclear warheads.
So it wasn't homemade?
I have no idea, but we sat around drinking it on the train down, and none of us can remember the journey. It was powerful. So we ended up in Changsha with incredibly sore heads, being greeted off the train, and initially we were put in a kind of motel-y styled hotel where we pretty much all slept off our hangovers. And then we were greeted by our colleagues at our new schools and taken off to here and there around the city. And in my school, I was working in the primary school affiliated to Hunan University, but I was the only person in the program who was going to that school. So I remember the teacher came to pick me off and dropped me off in my flat. And then she said she'd be back later on to help me buy supplies and get me settled in, which she was. But it was very much, here you go. This is it. You're off now. Enjoy.
And what was the apartment like when you were living in? Was that?
It was nice. It was perfectly pleasant, but it was very small. It was very, very small, and it was very clear that it'd been changed to suit me, in the sense of if you went into the shower room, you could see that there was an old squatting toilet in there, but they'd put a modern toilet on top of it. So you'd have the toilet going through the toilet, which was they tried to make an effort for me to settle in there, which was nice. And yeah, it was okay. I mean, it was just for me, so it was all it needed to be, but it was tiny, but good.
Nice. And then your colleagues in your first school, then, what were they all Chinese? Were they international?
All Chinese. I was working in a Chinese state school. Yeah, there was only, I want to say, 2 or 3 teachers that spoke any English. That was interesting. So they were always I remember they were always speaking to me through the teacher who was responsible for looking after me, which was nice. But you could hear a lot of like whispers going, Andrew. I was like, I want to talk to you. I want to. I know you're not being rude. I know you're not. And then but you just felt a little bit awkward. You knew people were talking about you.
You feel like a child. I think. If you're listening to someone speak, around you in a language which you should be involved in the conversation, but you can't understand it. It's a bit like, well, it reminds you of being like 5 or something. Your parents talking to each other, or adults are talking, and you're like just waiting there for the invitation to join in.
It was quite off-putting. I remember trying to say the basic Chinese that I did know, and then I remember them all giggling because of my pronunciation was awful. Because in Chinese you have 5 tones, so it's very, and all the tones mean completely different things. Like, for example, my wife's family name is Ma, which can be a question, or it can be a horse, or it can mean mother. It just depends on the tone. So you can accidentally call your mother a horse if you're not careful. And so that's why the humour develops, and they always thought it was quite funny me trying to practice Chinese.
But I think you still tried it, which is the main thing, right? It's all about doing it. And when you were teaching English, then I assume teaching English to the children, what was their level like beforehand? How did you get around teaching people a language which you can't speak their mother tongue either? So
it was as difficult as it sounds. My role as the foreign English teacher, I would go to all the classes from grades 1 to 5, and they follow an American system of schooling, by the way, in terms of ages. So there were 4 classes in each year group, so I'd do about 20 classes in a week for about 40 minutes, and I would stand at the front, and I would try and get them to talk in English, but Chinese state school classes range from anywhere between 40 pupils to about 60 or 70 pupils, all in one classroom, sitting at their desks. So it was incredibly challenging. I always ended up relying on the 2 or 3 pupils who could speak English to kind of help move the class along somewhat. And most of the classrooms had smart projectors and stuff, so I could play PPTs. I'd have lots of images and words and pictures, and I'd break the words down into syllables so it'd be easier to read. And I try and build sentences from that. But my class, it became apparent, was the fun class, because in my class they didn't have to do any work, in the sense of they wouldn't be filling in all the textbooks and stuff. So even they having other English classes where they'd sit down, they'd go for a textbook. And so my class was always seen as the fun one. As a result, though, it meant that my class it wasn't treated with the importance it should have been. So, for example, my class would be cancelled with about 5 minutes notice, or if the board wasn't working, I'd be expected to just make up something on the spot and almost act like an entertainer for 45 minutes. That was quite challenging to deal with.
It's a good thing you have your training in performing arts then, I suppose.
I fell back on that quite a lot, to be honest.
Just some zip-zap boying at something, yeah.
Yep, did all of that. I got that. I remember doing like an African gung boot dance as an extracurricular class. So I remember doing that. I remember doing a lot of the games that we used to do in Planet. So I was going like, okay, I've done that one. Oh, I haven't done Ninja. I should do Ninja with them. And I remember I just worked my way down the list.
Nice. And then obviously you met your now wife in the first kind of stint there. So how did you meet? What was the vehicle for meeting each other?
I was working at an international cultural fair, not through school, just something I did outside, and I was helping promote a run called Hash Run, which is a society that's got different groups all over the world, and the motto of the group is, we're a drinking club with a running problem. So it'd be very much you'd get in a bus and you'd meet at a subway station, go off somewhere really rural, you go for a run, have a couple of drinks, do a few silly things, and then go off for a meal afterwards. And it was a really, really pleasant experience. So I was involved in setting that up in Changsha. So I was there at this cultural fair promoting the event, and Susan came along with a friend of mine, and we got talking, we kept talking, and we kept talking, and we never really stopped talking until I left, to be honest. And so we just kind of hit it off straight away. And I knew that it was just about 3 months or so before I was due to leave, and I was thinking that I really don't want to say goodbye to this person. I really, we're just very, very compatible. We had the same thoughts, same feelings. We went on a couple of trips together, and the moment I met Susan, it was a complete game changer in terms of enjoying China. I started going to restaurants that I would never have gone to before, wouldn't have known about, because I wouldn't have understood the menu. I started going to places that, we in the UK, we all know about the Great Wall, we know about the Forbidden City, we know about Zhangjiajie if we've watched Avatar, and so there were some things we'd know, but we started going to these really off the beaten track places like Fanhuang, which is this beautiful, beautiful town right in the middle of Hunan. And it's got a lot of famous writers came from there. And in Chinese, they have something called feng shui, which is the idea, or it's like a life essence. So the idea, for example, like when your home your back should be to a hill, and there should be water in front of your building. And apparently that's really good life essence. And yeah, it's just the world completely changed.
Yeah, you can really see it or hear it in your voice as well in terms of your excitement when you're talking about it, and more so when you talk about obviously meeting your now wife. It's great to hear that unlocked another level of enjoying a country for you, which I think a lot of people who do move abroad, especially if you're single, you do find romance or romantic interests abroad, which do often unlock more avenues for you to go travel or go explore and have a different perspective on where you're living. When my girlfriend would come visit me in Sweden, it would be a similar thing. I'd go do different things to what I was doing day to day, because I didn't want to do it myself or with some colleagues, because it wasn't the same kind of experience. So we'd go to a nice restaurant, and we'd go on a spa trip somewhere else, because that's the thing you do anyway as a couple. You really see more.
The world changed, and suddenly a lot of the weird things that I had no understanding of, and I just think, why on earth are you doing that? Suddenly things started to make sense, and it was just beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Well, wonderful. So obviously you went back to the UK. What was that like? Did you have much reverse culture shock where the UK seemed different to you in a lot of ways?
Yeah, definitely. I remember being welcome back, and there was a lot. I had people of my family throw like a welcome back party, and they'd all got. I remember we ordered Chinese food as soon as I came back, but I started eating the food and I thought, I don't like this. What is this? What is this I'm eating? And it just dawned on me how our perceptions are of culture. Like, as a someone living in the UK view of Chinese food is not the same sort of Chinese food I was having out here. It's very, very different.
Which is interesting, because I know Liverpool's got the largest Chinese gate in Europe or something, which is, I only started learning that when I was studying there, and I was like, actually, it's pretty amazing, this community in Liverpool. And I've heard it's quite authentic, but then it depends on which part of China you're talking about, because China's huge, right? And there's so many different cuisines, cultures, subcultures. You can't just paint it with a broad brush saying this is authentic, when, it's like going to the UK and saying someone from Surrey is the same as someone from South Shields or Cumbria. Completely different, it's a very small island.
Not very much. The food culture here is insane. Like I could spend a whole hour and a half talking about the different cuisines, and I wouldn't even be anywhere near finished. And then inside those hidden cuisines, there's hidden cuisines inside hidden cuisines, and that where my wife's from, which is a very rural area called Xinjiang, which is right. If you were to get a pin, put it right bang on the middle of China, that's where she's from. And as a result, like, she gets the best of both worlds, because in China there's kind of a line that goes across the middle which separates north and south. In the north you have lots of open plains, and that's where wheat is grown. So they tend to be more noodle-based dishes and cuisines. But south of that line, that's where all the rice paddies are. So you get all your rice dishes. So Xinjiang, you'd get the best of both worlds. So you'd have the best of the north and the best of the south. And Xinjiang's one of those places where you only know about it if you know someone who lives there. By our standards, it's still a big city, but in Chinese standards, it's just somewhere you just pass through on the train. It's there's nothing there. That's why it's so amazing, because it's no one else goes there except me. I've even to this day, I've never seen someone who's not Chinese there.
Kind of going forward then, so obviously from Mexico and moved to Qatar after COVID. What was that like in terms of your first impressions of Qatar?
Qatar, I found it wasn't welcoming. I made friends quite quickly. I've got lots of good friends there and still do. But as a country to live in, it's very much, here's a town, put it in the sandbox, here's home. And of course, I was living in Qatar at a time when not only you had COVID, but you had the big blockade going on. So the rest of the Arab world was isolating Qatar, which has now since been lifted. So I was very much stuck in a very tiny peninsula, and so I could cross from east to west in about half an hour, and it was all sand and dirt, and that's all I had for a year or so.
I guess completely different to Beijing then. Why took you an hour and a half to go in the same city?
Yeah, but in that respect, it was rubbish, and also I was away from Susan as well, so there was I was feeling quite on my own at that point. I was feeling very isolated, so I had to talk to people, but I found myself not talking to Qataris because I was talking to other expats. So the experience I got in Qatar was I was talking to other people who were working there. It was great, lovely people, but it wasn't as genuine as being here in China.
Were you there during the building of the World Cup stadiums as well? So there's a lot of things happening.
They were all being built. So then I think there were a couple of test games either just before, just after I left. But I remember taking their subway up to where the stadium in Esdale was, and it was just a massive building site. I mean, you could regard the whole country as a building site because it's just sand and dirt, but there was absolutely nothing there.
What was social life like there? Obviously, you said you met a lot of expats. Was that in expat communities? Did you go out for drinks or food quite a lot? Did you host lots of parties or social events in your homes?
It was kind of a mixture of everything, really, and it depends on which group of friends you went out with would depict on what you did. So I had a lot of teacher colleagues, so we'd go around to each other's houses and we'd have barbecues. I met a lot of South Africans when I was out there, so I got fully indoctrinated in the braai culture.
A lot of biltong.
Oh yes, all of that. So went out for a lot of barbecues with them. I was still hash running with a group there, so I met up with a lot of businessmen there, and we'd go running off in the deserts and up and down wadis. We'd go for like barbecues on the beach on the other side, where it's a bit cooler. And also was also the brunch culture, where every Friday you'd go to hotels, you'd stay there for hours, and you'd eat and drink to your heart's content. It was great, it was lovely, but it never really felt genuine.
I guess you're obviously missing your partner as well, which is quite difficult, and it really does. I found when I was living away, really, that evenings are spent on the phone with her because that's the relationship you want to work on. So then you spend 40% of the time not exploring because you have to go and speak with your family and friends and really keep the relationship you've already got going. And you know it's not forever, so you don't commit to the people that are around you because it's okay. It's a year, or what's the bigger picture, which means you aren't going to be as adventurous, or you're not going to be able to do as much as you'd like to have achieved in that time.
Qatar would have been great if I was there with my family. So when my family set up being there now, it would be great. But when you're there by yourself, it's just not worth it. It's just get the money and go.
And now you're back in China permanently or for the foreseeable?
Almost certainly permanent, at the very least long foreseeable. I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. But the transition from going to Qatar to China was very stressful because of course, we're going back to a time of COVID where the world was starting to open up, but China was just not opening up at all. So it was I had to be really, really careful and basically not catching it in the first place. So I remember having to go almost quarantining myself in my flat for the final few weeks to make sure I didn't catch it, and having endless amounts of tests there. And this, of course, with all the police checks or getting all those checks done, so having to get stamps from the UK embassy, the Qatari consulate, and the Chinese consulate in Qatar. So getting all of that done, that was quite stressful. Then going back to the UK, and it got to the point where I was driving myself insane, literally just locking myself in my bedroom, taking meals, being almost paranoid about everything. And to the point where my mum just said, look, I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here for the weekend. Go. You're driving me insane. So I ended up spending a couple of days in Whitby, just on the other side in like the North York Moors, just hiking around. And so that kind of helped me just breathe a little bit. And then one of the requirements for going to China at that time was to get an infinite number of COVID tests, but you could only get the COVID tests done in certain specific clinics. And I remember both of these were in Manchester on either side, and I couldn't go to the same clinic twice. So I had to get the train all the way around across Manchester to go to Ashton to get my clinic test then. And when you go to the clinic, you think, oh, this is going to be like some sort of big, massive office, corporate building. No, it was just a local GP. But for some reason, that GP in Ashton was one of 2 places in the Northwest you could go.
I had to do a similar thing when I was traveling for work during 2021, and I had to go to like a random health centre, approved place, but it was like an old scout hut that had been turned into this like someone just poking the nose. They're not, because when you do yourself, it's quite specific knowledge, you're a lot more gentle. But when someone else doing it, you feel like you're getting like an Egyptian mummification because they're trying to take your brain out. It was not fun.
After having this test, well, the last one was about 48 to 72 hours of coming. It was one of those specific times before flying. I then had to go. I flew. That time I was flying from. Where was I flying to? I was flying to a city called Xiamen, which is on the coast of China, kind of about halfway around the circle. If Shanghai's 3 o'clock, Guangzhou's 6 o'clock, Xiamen's kind of in between the two on the coast. And I had to fly in via Amsterdam, so I got a quick hop from Manchester to Amsterdam. I then had 24-hour wait in Amsterdam because I had to have a COVID test as soon as I arrived. And this COVID test was the most brutal COVID test I had ever had. I mean, you said before about the way you push it right up to push it as far back as it'll go. This one went up, got it stopped there, and kept twiddling it around. And honestly, I felt like vomiting afterwards. It was brutal. I was in Amsterdam airport for the foreseeable, waiting for the code to turn green, which meant I could check in for the flight. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, the time is ticking by here. I'm going to miss my flight. Oh no, hurry up, come on. And I think the code only went green about half an hour before go to the departure area of the gate where the plane was. So that was very stressful. And then, of course, when we turn up there, you could see people in like full, not just COVID and masks on. It was masks, the visors, the gloves with gaffer tape wrapped around the gloves and white suits.
Full hazmat suit, yeah.
Yeah, felt like I was walking into Chernobyl, and it was terrifying. And even on the plane ride itself, it was terrifying because they sat you weren't allowed to sit next to anybody on the plane. It was like seat free. They gave you this bag of goodies for the entire flight, so there was no meals. It was just, here's your bag, this is all the food you're getting, you choose what you have when, this is all you're getting. They've got the flight into Xiamen, and then from them we were taken to a kind of warehouse where we had to sign things. We had to get another COVID test done, and we had to present all our documents, and then we were taken off to our quarantine hotels where we'd stay for 2 weeks. Now, I'd already quarantined in the UK because when I came back from Qatar, I was coming back to the UK at a time when we still had the quarantine hotels going on. So I ended up staying in a Holiday Inn outside of Heathrow Hotel on the first floor, overlooking a car park, and I was watching people walk. The only time you were allowed outside was if you were to walk around this car park. It felt like I was at a prison camp, and I was watching these people walking round and round and round. It was insane in the UK.
A car park 5K or something you're trying to do? Or...
It got to that point where I was seeing, when I went outside, I was doing full-on laps, and I was running, and I ended up doing 8, 9, 10 laps of a car park just to kind of A, let off some steam, and B, kind of just let that angst off. When you're sat in a room and you're not allowed out of the room, cabin fever really does set in, and it's set in a big way in the UK. But when I got to China and had to do the exact same thing for 2 weeks, because I'd already gone for a UK experience, I knew what to expect. So I'd make sure I'd stocked up on work, on films. I downloaded a lot of things. I tried to get ahead on some lesson planning, and I looked up some exercise routines. And then I'd be greeted at the door with people in hazmat suits giving me food and take the occasional COVID test. And yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, it's we're lucky to be out of that time, but it's probably not serious. It might happen again.
Once my quarantine in Xiamen had finished, we got the bullet train across because I'd said to my new school, there is no way you're putting me on a plane again. Like, I've been cooped up in planes, in airports, in hotel rooms. I need to see some of China again. So they put us on a bullet train from Xiamen down to Shenzhen, which was about 3 hours. And the way they organised it, they put at Xiamen station, they cordoned off about an eighth of the train station concourse, and they put anyone who was still under quarantine supervision inside that pen, and they wouldn't let you outside of it. So they had a toilet inside, so it was next to the toilet. People would go and order food from like your Burger Kings, McDonald's, or your restaurants, whatever. And then they'd bring the food to you. And then when I was put on the train, I had about the entire carriage to myself. Well, me and a few other people who were also in the quarantine situation. But the train was packed, like either side, and there was all the seats were full in either carriage. But in our carriage, it was kept completely empty. And then I was put into another hotel in Shenzhen for about a week. And in that hotel didn't provide any food. You had to order all your foods. And if you've been in China long enough, you'll know your way around your Meituan, your Jing Dongs, all your ways of ordering foods. But I'd arrived from the UK and I had no knowledge of this. So I had to call up my school's HR and say, guys, can you order me a pizza? I've got no food and you must order now, otherwise I'm not going to eat today. It got even more terrifying on the second or third day, because there was a typhoon warning. So there was, it didn't hit Shenzhen. It kind of went a long way south out to sea, but all the schools were closed for 24 hours. And at one point, it looked like the path of the storm was going to go over Shenzhen. So everyone was locking down, and that was terrifying because I was going, oh my God, I'm in a hotel here. I've got no way of getting food. Like, am I going to be hit by an almighty storm? And like, is everything going to be? That was scary. But then after all of that, I got reunited with Susan again, and that was, as you can imagine, with any reunion, it always sometimes in Hollywood they feel very over dramatized and staged, but this one was like that. But it was completely genuine. It was just wonderful, just an absolutely wonderful moments of after going through so much anxiety and stress.
It's incredible, and obviously now you've got a wonderful child. What was that like? Obviously, your wife gave birth in China, so what was the whole experience like compared to what you thought of the UK system or the NHS? Did you have any understanding of it all?
I was very worried and anxious about it, but looking back on it, it was incredibly smooth sailing and much smoother than it would have been in the UK. It was very, very straightforward. In terms of the actual process, it kind of happened a little bit earlier than we expected. I mean, we were lying in bed and it started happening and we're like, oh, okay, time to go. So at that point, I was living in my school because I was working in a boarding school. So I called the ambulance to the school in the middle of the night. Luckily, it was one of the school holidays, so there weren't many kids around. But still, the ambulance was turning up into the school grounds to take me and my wife and my in-laws, who were there at the time, to the hospital. And it was a long process. It was a very long process. And we talk about do we go to the delivery room or don't we go to the delivery room? And in the UK, you go there, at least the one comfort you could take is that everyone there speaks your language. But here in mind, in that room, the only people who could speak English were Susan and myself. And of course, Susan was delivering birth, so there was no way I was going to ask her to translate what the doctors were saying because she's going through labour. So that was unnerving. I found afterwards that one of them had said to Susan, if he faints, we're just going to walk over him. Nothing's going to happen. If anything gets on him, things get on him, but he's going to be left exactly where he is.
Did you faint?
No, I'm very proud of that. I did not faint. So Susan gave birth to our son. And in China, they have something what's called a mump sitting centre, which is where mother goes to recover and the baby goes as well, of course. And it's basically you have a nurse who stays with you, and the nurse is responsible for you and you alone 24/7 for 4 weeks. And it was expensive. It was really expensive, but it's incredible how much you got for it. So the meal plans were designed for her. We had lessons in how to look after a baby. Like, it sounds as simple as like how to change a nappy sensibly, how to hold a child, how to comfort, do all the basic things you kind of, as a new parent, you expect to learn as you go along. Here was someone here teaching us how to do it and like reassuring us and taking Jamie to like baby swimming lessons and massage therapies and all sorts. It was quite something. It was incredible. And we were quite lucky because where this place was next door to my school. So whereas for some families, they'll be traveling from one side of Shenzhen to the other just to go to this place, here I was just walking in from work after doing a 9 till 5 session at school, walking in to be with my wife and son. And that was quite something. I don't think it really hit being a dad until we brought Jamie home because I wasn't there the full time because of work and stuff.
And did you get much time for paternity leave?
in China, the law is you get exactly 10 working days. So I managed to negotiate with my school to move it back because I knew we were going to go to this mum sitting centre. I negotiated so that I could have my 2 weeks the moment Susan and Jamie came out of the hospital. So I had those 2 weeks then to help set in. And that was strange because it was, as you can imagine, it was in the middle of term time and I was living on site. So I'd go out of my flat, and I'd see my kids doing PE. But I was always there, and just very, very surreal. Even when I was like making a cup of tea in the morning, I was looking out the room and I could see, oh, there's one of my kids, there's one of my troublemaker kids being a so-and-so on the playgrounds. And just, no, I'm on leave, I can't do it. It's not me. So that was a very weird experience.
What's it like? Obviously, you said your in-laws don't speak English and you're learning Mandarin, albeit slowly because it's very difficult. How's that relationship work? Is a lot of it fall on your wife in terms of helping being the medium between the mediator between the two of you, or?
At first, yeah, very much so. I was, as I said, I think I said already, I was terrified the day I was going to meet them. Absolutely terrified. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going right to the middle of China here. I'm going to this really remote place. They're going to bury me in cement. I read a lot of horror stories about in-laws and all this sort of stuff. And of course, even in the UK, when you meet your in-laws for the first time, you're a little bit nervous. You want to impress them. And here I was rocking up. I couldn't speak a word of Chinese and they couldn't speak a word of English. So this is going to be an absolute disaster. But they were, and still are, absolutely incredible. They are two of Susan's parents are two of the most genuine, welcoming people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. And they, of course, at the beginning, they spoke through Susan. But as time went by, I kind of understood more Chinese, and maybe not enough to have fluent conversations with them, but I start to understand and hear a lot more. And, oh, I know that phrase, so that's going to mean that. And so I started getting there. And of course, apps like WeChat and things have translators now. So it's much easier to communicate than it used to be. And so we kind of got there in the end.
I know communication, then obviously you're 8 hours ahead of your family at home. What's that like in terms of how often do you speak to them? How do you speak to them? Obviously requiring VPNs and things.
Well, we organise Zoom calls every few months or so to kind of check in, and it'll be very much everyone sits down at a computer for about Sunday morning their end, Sunday evening my end, and we talk and catch up, and it feels like we talk about absolutely anything. And sometimes the conversations will be incredibly mundane about, oh, that was on the telly last night. Did you catch that? Oh, I did watch that. Oh, I need to watch that. Don't give me the spoilers or anything. And it was mundane, but it was so nice to listen to because I don't have those conversations here for good and the bad. It was just, I don't get homesick particularly. And even when I first came out here, I never really got homesick, but it's like a comfort blanket or like a favorite movie, which you've seen again and again and again and again, but you still can't help but watch it because it makes you feel better about things.
Completely. Yeah, that's a very good point. So welcome back to the podcast and welcome to section 3, a review of your time. So Andrew, going back to when you first moved, if you could give yourself some inspiration or some advice, what would you tell yourself to do differently? What would you advise yourself on to do more of or less of?
I'm inclined to say go back and give yourself a better Chinese dictionary, but I think looking back now, I remember stressing out trying to learn Chinese as best I could, but in reality, through people you meet, just tell yourself to relax. Everything will be absolutely fine. And even in Changsha, there were still plenty of expats around. And one thing I've learned as an expat is it doesn't matter where you are in the world or your nationality or where you've come from or where you've been. The fact that you are an expat means automatically you have something in common with that person. So I found myself talking to pretty much anyone. And so, and you just find yourself making friends with people you would never dream of talking to in the UK. So I think what I would certainly tell myself, just relax a little bit more, go out, maybe enjoy your first year more, because over time things settle down. You find yourself not being as active or going out as much as you used to. So go out and go back and enjoy all those crazy nights out you used to go on, and go to all these meals, go and talk to all these people.
No, it's a great bit of advice, and I kind of agree with you. One thing I've learned from doing this podcast is I'm speaking to people who I've never thought my life would have since it crossed with. Obviously, you're different because I've known you from childhood, but people who I met on Facebook communities who are expats, I've just got, hey, do you want to share your story? And we'll talk like we're doing now for an hour and a bit. And you learn, you get someone's perspective and empathy from someone because you have that one mutual link, whether you both lived abroad or you're both experiencing or have experienced similar things, albeit different countries. For me, for you, obviously it's the same country, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm from X, Y, and Z, and oh right, really, that's cool. And
Yeah, and you start sharing stories about the towns you've been to, the hotels you've stayed in, the food you've eaten, and yeah, you say things, you try things, you do things you would never normally have done before.
and if you could, I guess, what's your best moment so far in terms of the traveling journey? Obviously, apart from meeting your wife and now your child, what else stood out for you as a highlight?
Well, when I showed them this episode, if I don't say those two things, I'll get into a lot of trouble. But probably the trips we've been on, like, as I've mentioned, you start going to all these places you wouldn't have heard of. And one of the trips that me and Susan went on was we went up to a place called Harbin, which is right in the very northeast tip of China, in the area above North Korea. And it's an area called Manchuria. And the food there is it's the closest you're going to get to UK in the sense of it's very hearty, it's very filling. And when we went up there, we chose Harbin because it's got something called the Harbin Ice Festival, where they create these huge carvings and statues made up entirely out of ice, and it's mind-blowing. Like they get these big blocks of ice, almost exactly like you see in Frozen. They cut the ice out of the river. They pick up these big blocks, they transport it, and they start building these incredible statues and pieces of artwork out of ice. And I remember one of them was this big, massive bottle of Harbin beer, which is one of the main beers in China. And between the opening and closing time, you'd see the bottle get emptier and emptier and emptier until at closing time there'll be nothing left in the bottle. And so the light would go, okay, that's it, the bottle's dry, time to go home.
It's like their version of an hourglass.
Yeah, it was, but in this case it was a beer glass. But it was extraordinary. It was at times it was ranging between minus 15 and minus 25 degrees Celsius, so it was bitterly cold. So we were wrapped up in all the layers you could possibly think of. I very much looked like the Michelin Man, and it was just extraordinary. Like it was a part of China that was previously occupied by the Russians, so there were a lot of Russian buildings there, and you'd see people on the side of the streets selling the Russian hats, and it was brilliant. It was one of the best trips I've ever been on, and it's somewhere I would go to again. But now I'm starting to hear that as more and more people learn of these places, you get more and more tourists going to them, so it becomes more and more busy. I mean, even when we went there, some of the slides we just didn't bother queuing up for. These slides, of course, being made out of ice, but we didn't bother queuing up for them because the queues were just so long. Why waste an hour and a half queuing when you could be going and doing something else, like skating on an ice rink or like doing something else entirely?
And I see you managed to, I guess, go against your British urge to join a queue.
Oh yeah, it was very much like, I'm not going anywhere near that. I'm not wasting my time. I've done enough of that. I do all of that in the UK. I'm not doing it here.
What advice would you give to someone who would be moving to China today? So if someone listening now is looking, hey, I want to go teach in China, what advice would you give them?
Download WeChat, because everything runs through WeChat. It's got your translators. It's got, in China, you don't really pay with money anymore. You scan QR codes, which goes straight to your bank accounts. So make sure you've got all of that set up. I would say don't stress out too much about the language, because there'll always be someone who can help you. And I would say China's so varied, so different, depending on where you go. I live in the south, and it's very tropical, but Harbin's right on the opposite side, and right now in Harbin, it's about minus 20 degrees. And here I am, it's currently 22 degrees Celsius here. So it's very different depending on where you go. So I would say do your research as to what part of China you want to go to and where you want to be, and then look for schools or jobs or whatever it is you want to do in that area.
Great. And what advice would you give to anyone moving anywhere in the world? So if they were to move to throw a dartboard at a map and it would land somewhere.
Quite simply, just do it. I mean, you can get tongue-tied and go, oh my gosh, I need to get all these visas, I need to pay for this, I need to pay for that, I need to get this done, I need to do this, who's going to look after this, oh my gosh, I've got all this stuff, what do I pack? Just go ahead and do it, because the moment you start second-guessing and start worrying about things, it stops happening, and before you know it, the urge to go has gone. So if you are going to stand there for a dartboard and go to wherever that country is, obviously don't go to the airport right that second, but do it. Go out there as soon as you can, because before you know it, the opportunity is gone.
It's one of those things you'll always find the excuse not to do something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's very easy to talk yourself out of it. As I've said before, the expats always have something in common because you are from another country, and that does take bravery. It takes guts. It takes that urge to jump off a leap of faith, and not necessarily know where you're going to end up, but just having that belief that everything will be fine. So no matter what, it doesn't matter. So just do it, quite simply.
Wonderful. Well, I think there's anything more to share or add. Just want to thank you for answering my message on Facebook. I know it's not something people use very often. You got WeChat, but yes, thank you for responding to me and giving me your time, albeit with the time difference. It's worked out well, and it's very interesting listening to your story about the traveling and teaching. It's very because I've never really experienced much teaching. It's not what I've been. I'm an engineer, so teaching is something I'm exposed to often, but it's something the world in which you've had to go through, and it's opened lots of doors for you. I imagine, especially international teaching, being able to basically get any country in the world and working in a school. That sounds amazing. So thank you for sharing that information and sharing your story, and hopefully you've inspired more people who are listening to this show and to follow in your footsteps, or go and do some research to find out how to do it. And yeah, we'll see you next time. The Expat Pod.